You're listening to the Mind Takeaway podcast with your hosts Mira and Peter.
In our quest to help create a world without inequality, poverty and war, we share insights gained through our work about leadership, psychology and creativity.
You will also hear conversations with ordinary people who do extraordinary things due to their increased awareness, curiosity and intuition, plus their deep connection with others.
Welcome to another micro episode of the Mind Takeaway podcast.
Welcome.
Today we join you from Venice, believe it or not.
Yeah, we came here to disconnect from everyday life and work, so we could take a few days to do some planning and engage our creativity a little bit more than usual.
Yeah, and the reason we picked Venice is because for quite a while now we wanted to visit one place in particular, which I'll try and pronounce it correctly, so apologies if this is the wrong pronunciation, but it's called the Ospedale Santa Maria della Pietà.
Or Pietà.
Or Pietà, I'm not sure. But this place, we found out that for over a century, there was these female virtuoso musicians who were multi-instrumentalists. And I'll give you the background. So these women were orphans, and I guess there were kids born to illegitimate liaisons and prostitutes and stuff like this. And this Ospedale is basically a charity that was run by the city, and they would bring in these orphans. And actually what's interesting is the orphans were left at a door. There was a revolving door that we actually found. Right, actually today the door is inside a bar, inside
Metropole Hotel.
Yeah, inside a hotel. And these children used to be left at the doorstep and a bell used to be rung, and then they would take them in. And usually, it's quite a sad story really, because the women that left these babies would leave some kind of trinket with the hope that maybe they might be reunited in the future. But what we were told when we were getting a bit more background to the history is sadly very rarely would any parents come back for these children. Mm-hmm. So what happened inside this orphanage is that everyone had their roles, they worked, but it wasn't like some kind of hard labor, like a children's sweatshop or anything like that.
It was a school.
Yeah, it was a proper school. Obviously, I had a religious background, being part of a institution in Italy, in Venice. But they were trained really well, taught to read and write and mathematics, but crucially, they were taught music. So every day they got some time to practice music, and I'm sure you've heard of Vivaldi. So Vivaldi was once a musical director, and we were told that he would come back to be the musical director many times in his career. And the reason why he was drawn to this place is because the Ospedale had the best musical instruments in the world at the time. It also was a laboratory for Vivaldi, because he could come train these female virtuosos so well that he would make intricate pieces of music, apparently over 400. Sadly, only maybe 60 odd are in existence right now, because back in the day, the French invaded and a lot of the documents were lost. In fact, we wouldn't even know about this Ospedale and the history of these virtuoso women had we not heard of a painting being found hundreds of years later in Washington, D.C. in the US. And apparently this painting was looked at by some historians, and then they started to trace back the musical history. Mm. So yeah, anyway, it just seems like such a creative hotbed at the time, and actually the world's instruments were being crafted there. So you've probably heard of cellos that are worth probably 3 million US now. Stradivari.
Yes, Stradivari.
And they were really testing new types of instruments that don't even exist now. They were just experimenting. So these women were actually not only trained on one musical instrument, but they were encouraged and even paid to learn multiple instruments. What happened in this church next door to the Ospedale, they would perform. But what was interesting is people would come from all over Europe, sometimes from different parts of the world, to watch these virtuoso female musicians, and they would play in the balcony of the church, but a veil would cover their faces. And the reason for that is because they were sometimes disfigured. They were missing maybe even a foot or fingers, even a hand in some cases, and this was because they were born to maybe prostitutes who had syphilis, for example, so they might be disfigured. And what the church thought, maybe it was too scary for people to see. So people would come and they would be kings, princes, princesses, counts and countesses, and all these well-off people. And sometimes these rich men would demand to see these females. I want to see them, I want to see them. So eventually, if they asked many times, they would if they asked many times, they would get to see these females. And when the veil was taken away and when they were given a private audience, the accounts that we heard were people were shocked and disgusted and reacted quite strongly, because these women were, to the people at the time, they were quite shocking.
It was shocking that they were women, and especially they say that some of the instruments were quite big, and they said it didn't look nice for a woman to play such a big instrument. So it's interesting to see, where we are as a society right now to where we were then. But it's also interesting to see of how progressive it was, even though it was a church, and they still were maintaining their own dogma and covering women and pushing them away. In a way, they were pushing boundaries with education, with art, and including, and some of these women were really, really famous, and they became virtuosos independently and travel the Europe playing on chords.
Yeah, and as we said, they were called the Figlie Del Coro, and they dominated for over a century. They were the best virtuoso solo performers, and as a unit they would perform, and each of the females, as they got older, would train younger females. So what else? We also got to visit a museum that was just really a bonus. It was called the Leonardo Da Vinci Museum. And actually, I read recently Da Vinci's latest biography, and it was one of the best biographies. And what I learned from that period was that in his life, he spent a short period of time in Venice because he was originally in Milan. Milan was invaded, so he thought he would visit Venice, and he took a long journey, and he visited lots of places on the way. But what was interesting is he got really into engineering. He was trying to design military hardware, etc., because he thought that that's what would make some money. I mean, realistically, all he wanted to do was actually do it, make his art, and what he wanted was a rich patronage, I guess.
Another interesting thing about Venice is that what I've noticed on the first day, first evening, and a first full day here, is that time seemed to be slower than what I would normally perceive. There is no cars here. There is water everywhere, so you can hear the calming influence of water. And and everything is slower. I don't know. It's really interesting. It's 7 p.m., but it feels like it's 10 all. It was really interesting to see of how when the mind slows down, when we get in tune with a different speed internally and externally, how we think, what comes up, how can we reflect on things, and what are our thoughts and ideas about the future. So this is a little bit of experiment for us. We know that whenever we go away, whenever we go into different environment, our mind perceives things differently, and we open up to seeing different things, and different creative ideas come up. But this was, I think, again, additional to the experience that we would normally get.
And the other part that we wanted to share is that it got us reflecting on the whole connection with creativity and curiosity. I don't know if you ever thought about this, but we see both of them going hand in hand. You can't really be deeply creative unless you're also deeply curious. And that's a good segue back into Leonardo da Vinci, that he was just a deeply curious human being. He didn't have any real institutionalized formal training or qualifications. However, he just got his teeth into everything. He would spend time with as many people from many different disciplines as he could, just to pick their brains, just to be curious about how things work. I mean, he even cut up cadavers. He got friendly with people who worked in hospitals and the like, and he got to learn a lot about
how human body works, anatomy.
Yeah, anatomy. And in many ways, he went there first. He wasn't medically trained. He wasn't a doctor. He never went to medical school. But some of his discoveries were so ahead of their time.
Apparently, he was actually never really educated in any specific discipline. He was self-taught, and the curiosities, got him wherever he was, and discovering things, and the way he was painting was based on his discoveries about human body. And that was really interesting, because when we were walking around the streets, there's really small streets, and it looks like it's not going anywhere, and then you get in and it's like a huge palace in front of you. And it got me curious about my own curiosity, and I thought I was quite curious person. However, doing this, reflecting and seeing, observing my behavior and emotions slowed down, I realized that actually I wasn't as curious as I thought. I would often stop myself. I would have a curious thought, but then my preconceived perception of something would stop me. I would go, oh, this is interesting, but I can't go there, or I shouldn't go there, or I can't ask this, or I shouldn't ask that. So I would notice these thoughts coming up that would stop me investigating further, going further. So big part of our stay here was actually going through those thoughts and not really going back, but regardless of what I might think or feel, going forward and going with my curiosity, which was interesting to see what we've seen because of it. It's interesting to notice that the feeling of discomfort has subsided, and I'm also curious to see what is going to happen as a result of it in the future.
And we're all born deeply curious. If you just have to watch children, and they've got curiosity baked in 100%. It's just adulthood gets in the way. And if we can stay curious, then this is what leads to innovation. This is what leads to deep curiosity, being able to problem solve. And we all have it in spades. All humans are deeply creative creatures. It's just that the way that we live our experience, as Mira pointed to, the way that we hold ourselves back because it's uncomfortable, or we're just not used to being deeply curious. And sometimes we feel guilty for showing a deep interest in a person or a thing or something, But what if we were to say that this is completely natural to who we are? And the more that we can embrace this, you'd be amazed at what can happen. I mean, I don't know what Mira thinks of me, but I feel that I'm quite a curious person. But even for me, because I spend most of my waking hours being deeply curious about everything, but I even catch myself dialing the curiosity back. So as Mira said, it's really good that if you can find a few pockets of quiet time for reflection or just a change of scenery, and it doesn't matter where it is, it can be anything. You know, if you're stuck in an office and your team's stifled, your creativity seems like it's run out, then go outside, go to the local park, get some fresh air. Even that change of scenery, just by getting up and moving your body, it can completely change your mind state and get you more creative. So yeah, hope this has been an interesting episode. I'm sure you can hear some of the sounds in the background. There's people wandering. You can hear the canal, the water, and some boats. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You made it to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening.
Are you looking for one-on-one coaching? Do you want to develop your leadership skills? Would you like to improve your team's performance? Drop us an email at info@themindtakeaway.com. We would love to help you.